Good leaders ask great questions, and when it comes to growing yourself, your church, your home, your business, or your family, there are 5 important questions that every leader needs to ask. Today, I'll give you these 5 most important questions for growth on the GrowLeader podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to the GrowLeader podcast, where we grow leaders that grow churches and help make a difference right where they are. My name is Matt Miner. I'm your host for the podcast today, and I'm joined, as always, I guess I say always, it's our first time doing this. But
this is the inaugural podcast.
From here on out, it will always be this way. Pastor Chris Hodges, how are you, PC?
Thank you, sir. I'm so glad that you're here, and you have been chosen to be the host of our podcast, and I'll tell you why, folks. Matt Miner is not only one of our campus pastors, but you truly are one of the most delightful, funny. In fact, you always do like stand-up at every one of our all-staff meetings that we have every month. Let everybody kind of get to know you just for a minute here.
First of all, I'm thankful to have a job where I can be myself. And I started out on the creative team. So I actually remember my interview with you over 10 years ago.
Like we're doing videos.
Making videos. And then that progressed from, I was a video editor, and I was very slow. And so they did not keep me in that space for very, very long. And so then I started coming up with content for church. And then just because you're a great leader and you see things in people they don't see in themselves, got called into something else. And so now I get to lead my favorite campus at Church of the Highlands, the Grandview campus, but love all of our campuses. But yeah, I love it. And it's an honor to be here with you.
Yeah, we have 23 locations, and Matt really pastors one of our flagship locations. In fact, we're getting ready to move our Highlands College.
It's exciting times.
To that location. We're in the final stages of the first phase of the renovations and additions to that beautiful Grandview facility, but really, truly excited to have you on here. I'm going to bring the content. You can kind of keep it all connected and throw in a joke or two along the way. That'll make it fun.
Well, I'm excited about it. And I want to let you know, if you're new to the podcast, new to GrowLeader as well, we just came off of our annual conference. We're getting ready to do more events coming up very, very soon. And I want to start there and just say, it was amazing to have rooms full of people, 3 different campuses in Birmingham, of leaders who are hungry and fired up and just ready to go out and change the world. Loved having that event this year.
It's actually my favorite thing that I do all year long. I tell people that I never have more wind in my sails than when I'm at the Grow Conference, and it was a spectacular week. I love helping churches and pastors reach their growth potential. Tell them about the sponsors that kind of make it all possible.
Well, today we're actually sitting here because of the generosity of Wesleyan Investment Foundation. And without their help, we would not be doing this podcast. And so really, really grateful for them. You can find out more about them and what they do at wifonline.com.
And they're huge friends because WIF has, I think it's over $350 million of loans out to ARC churches alone. They've been that generous. I mean, many cases where banks have said no, WIF has said yes. And they have truly not only become great partners, but they're dear, dear friends.
They've been doing it a long time.
Exactly. And then they also give the best rates for money on deposit. I mean, we have the money that we're having, that we have on deposit with them. So can't recommend them more.
So great. We'll talk about the podcast a little bit. So brand new. We're doing this for the first time. Frequency. We're going to do this the first Monday of every single month. You're going to have brand new content. And the goal of the podcast literally is to help leaders. They're not having to overthink what they're doing. We want to put tools in their toolbox.
And it's specifically designed to grow churches. I mean, that's the call on my life. But here's what I know, in that I get calls from business leaders and from executives that want me to come teach some of this content. I've done it on many occasions because all of it is applicable and transferable in those settings. So if you're not a church leader, maybe you lead a family or you're in a business, I promise you'll find a lot of good nuggets in all of this content.
We're going to do this first Monday of every single month. And if you're running right now or working out, maybe you're on a treadmill, maybe you're just sitting in your car and you're worried about how am I going to take notes, we've done that for you. You can find all of that in the show notes, wherever you're consuming this content. So whether it's YouTube or at growleader.com, the show notes will always be easiest to access at growleader.com. And also, if you missed the conference and you're thinking, man, I have FOMO right now, I wish I was there, there are more events coming up. And so be sure to watch the calendar at growleader.com.
Yeah, roundtables that you can sign up for. There are experience type events. We're even exploring into the consulting world and helping churches going to where they are to helping them grow. So it's exciting.
Here we go. You ready to do this?
I am.
All right, you get one first time in a podcast.
And honestly, if I only had one time to speak with someone for 30 minutes, this is what I would do. And that is I would ask them questions.
Right.
I would ask 5 questions. So if I'm sitting with you and you said, man, PC, help me grow my church. Help me figure out how to make my family meaningful. Help me make my business meaningful. There are 5 questions that I would ask you. And I love questions. John Maxwell, who's a personal friend, of course, he was at the conference. He's there every year to speak to us. He's like a father to me. But he wrote a book called Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. And I now collect questions. I actually literally have files and files of great questions. We ought to do a whole podcast just on these questions and deliver these in our show notes. But again, if I only get one chance, and so since this is season 1, episode 1, here's the name of this lesson, and that is the 5 most important questions for growth. So if you're taking notes, write these down. If you can't write these down, they'll be in our show notes. But here's the first one, Matt. I call it the clarifying question. And the clarifying question is, what is the measurable win? And don't forget the word measurable.
That's great.
And what I mean by measurable is that you can't just say, man, this is our goal, but this is how here's how we're gonna know if it worked or not, because it's actually a measurable goal. Well, so when I do consult, and it's been very informal now for the past 10 years or so, it's getting ready to be formalized more to really go help churches. The first thing I ask them is, what is the win?
I bet you get a lot of different answers.
So how do you know what is it, and how do you know when you've done it? What is it? So if you're going to put a score on the scoreboard, what caused that? What's so interesting is, and I can't do this in every setting that I go consult in, because sometimes the pastors honestly are so insecure they don't want these answers to be known to everyone. But if they'll let me, I'll have everybody that I'm meeting with, let's just say it's the lead team of 7 or 8 people, say, write down what you think the touchdown line looks like for this church. Like, what is the it, and how do you know if you've done it? And 2 things have happened every single time without exception, and that is I get great answers, and I get different answers.
Wow.
And they're all good, but they're just different. So if you can imagine if you're playing a sport and everybody thinks the touchdown line is in a different place, can you imagine if they break the huddle and go run the play and everybody thinks the touchdown line's in a different spot? It's not going to be a very successful play. So the very first most important question for a family, for a marriage, in fact, you ready for this? Just for yourself,
right,
is what is the measurable win? How do I know when I've done it, and can I articulate it? And because what I know is that great organizations are clear. Great organizations know why they exist, and they know how to measure. So the way we say it is that we measure ourselves, of course, on the Great Commission.
Right.
In our minds, the Great Commission is 4 things. It's that we want lost people saved people pastored people discipled people mobilized. I'll say that again. We want to get lost people saved people pastored. In other words, help them through their issues. We want pastored people discipled, and we want discipled people mobilized. So this is so once we set that in place, now we know. What we didn't have, of course, and you know this being on our team, that's a great vision. It wasn't articulated that well. Mm-hmm. So once you have a clarity of what the touchdown line looks like, then you have to have clarity of how you're going to communicate it. And of course, we teach this all the time. Language creates a culture of, and clarity is so important. So for us, I'll let you say them. You know the 4 ways we say it at Highlands.
We want people to know God, find freedom, discover their purpose, and then make a difference everywhere they go.
And so we have that on mugs, T-shirts, walls, videos. It's everywhere. And you can ask people that have been at our church, a week or 2. They know, whether they agree with it or not, they know. We want you to know God. We want you to find freedom. We want you to discover your purpose, and then we want you to go make a difference. And that has a ring to it. And now, to God be the glory that there are tens of thousands of churches using that same very language. So first question, so very important to ask, is what is the measurable win? How are we going to measure? And I want to give you the second question, and I call this the focus question. And the focus question is, what are we going to do to accomplish what we answered in question number 1?
This is how. How are we going to do it?
And because now we know what the touchdown line looks like. Now we got to run a play.
Right.
So what are we going to do? What set of plays are going to be called so we cross that touchdown line and 7 points goes up on the scoreboard, right? So that's the goal now. And this is a systems question. I'm kind of known as the systems guy. People call me the systems guy.
We do love systems.
We do love systems. In fact, everybody has them. Everybody uses them. The question is, do they work? So you can have a system, and everybody has a system. A system is what you've done to accomplish a vision. A system is a set of principles and procedures that determine how something is going to be accomplished. So it delivers the vision. And honestly, Matt, I got impacted by this one. I probably learned systems best reading one of my top 5 favorite books of my life called The E-Myth. Okay, and it's written by a guy named Michael Gerber. It's been around for decades. And the E-Myth is, the E stands for entrepreneurial. The entrepreneurial myth is, if you have a great product, you'll have a great successful company. And that's a myth. It's not true. You can have a fantastic product and still fail if you don't know how to deliver the product.
So good.
So it's all in the delivery of it, not just in the idea itself. And that's why people have come up with some great inventions, some phenomenal products that never took off. And while on the other hand, there have been some very mediocre products that were delivered incredibly well, and they're some of the largest companies in the world today, and I'll give McDonald's as one of those. I have never met a single person in my life who said, I think that's the best hamburger I've ever eaten.
Above the age of 8, because my kids will tell you.
Okay, I'll give you that one. But that is true. But right. So, but no one's going there going, oh my God, I think I've just had the best hamburger of my entire life. What McDonald's did so well, and while they are the largest hamburger franchise, are the delivery mechanisms, the drive-through window, the playground, the Happy Meal. I can get it in your hands in 30 seconds, right? So what they did is they perfected the delivery of a vision. And honestly, what Grow probably does best is that we help churches come up with systems that help them deliver their vision. The story I love to tell, I probably told this, I think I told this at our conference last week.
The story is painful to me because we all have blind spots.
You know what story I'm getting ready to tell.
This is a painful story, but it's so helpful at the same time.
So there was a pastor who came to me and said, we've been stuck at 400 people for decades. And so I asked him question number 1, not like I gave it today. I just said, well, what do you hope to accomplish in your city? And he gave me a very kind of a Pentecostal answer. He kind of even said it in a Pentecostal way. He said, oh, I want to reach people for the glory of God. He did the glory, he did that whole part, right? And I said, okay, great. And so what are you really trying to say to me? He goes, I don't want to just pastor Christians. I want to reach lost people. I said, okay, great. So that's your vision. So that honestly, that's a good answer. The problem came is, what are you doing to accomplish that vision? This is question number 2 we're talking about today. And he goes, well, I don't know, what do you mean by that? I said, well, tell me about your service. Tell me about your Sunday service. Have you created something that lost people love to attend? He goes, I don't understand. I said, well, how long is your service? He goes, it's almost 2 hours. I said, well, yeah, well, that's long for a Christian.
Right.
All right. So I said, well, that's long. He goes, I know. I said, well, how much of that is your preaching? He goes, oh, about an hour. And I started laughing. And I said, bro, that's a long time. He goes, yeah, but I'm really good.
My goodness.
And I laughed. I belly laughed out loud. There's only 2 of us sitting in my office as we're having this conversation. I said, brother, and he pointed his finger in my face and said, I'm not changing that. And this is someone who has a great vision, but fell in love with a system that's never going to deliver that vision. And for that reason, he was stuck. And so he goes, well, I'm not changing that. He says, well, if you're not willing to change that, then I'm not able to help you, because you're not in love with your vision. You're not in love with your city. You're in love with the way you do church.
That's why that story is painful.
Yeah, exactly. And the way I say it is, Matt, there's often a disconnect between the vision we have and the systems we've created to deliver it. So what do? We have to find the right one. What's the right one? The one that works. So in other words, if no one's getting saved, well, then it's still the wrong one. If there are no lost people coming to faith, well, then it's still the wrong one. So we keep tweaking the system until it's delivering the vision. And in that, very important, don't fall in love with the system. So we have systems, and you would know those as well. So you already answered the know God, find freedom, discover purpose, make a difference. But we've created systems at Highlands that deliver it. And I'll let you give that one as well.
Weekend services, small groups, growth track, which is how we assimilate people onto our teams, and then the dream team.
Yeah, so we're doing those 4 things. We're getting lost people saved on our weekend services. They're knowing God there. They're finding freedom in groups. They're discovering their purpose on a growth track. They're making a difference on a dream team. But that's only what we're doing today. If those things ever stopped working, we would find something else, because we're not in love with our system. We're in love with our vision.
And I know there's a certain personality type, and maybe I was this way a long time ago, that when you hear the word system, you immediately go, This is not going to allow me to create. This is going to make me be inflexible, where I can't move and pivot. And systems do just the opposite. It gives you more room to create.
Well,
We
truth be known-
change all the time.
Truth be known, that's a system. You're whatever they're doing is still what they've come up with to deliver the vision, which leads us into question number 3, and it's an important one. I call this one the reality question.
Here's the measuring.
And that is it working?
Right.
Or say it this way, how are we doing? So we've got a vision. It's clear for the first time. Praise God for that. Now we have a system that we're hoping delivers it. Question 3 is going to tell you if it is or isn't. And that is, how are we doing? But you can't know how something's doing if you're not checking on how something's doing. The story I love to tell, my first assignment in ministry, I was a youth pastor at my home church in Baton Rouge. And one of my assignments was, we had like this youth hall that had a basketball gym and a little meeting space, a little place that eat hamburgers and stuff like that. And one of my jobs as youth pastor was to come back whatever time at night, 10 or 11 o'clock, make sure all the doors were locked. And it was kind of on the back side of the property of the church. And I pull up to this youth building, and behind the youth building is a car with fogged up windows and people in it.
Every youth pastor has experienced this at some point.
And I'm like, I'm livid. I'm ready, because we don't do that right. And I remember going over that window and I banged on the window, open this door right now. And the window came down, and it was 2 of our elders in our church. Like, these are like 60, 70-year-old folks. It's like one of our most, they
Some
like,
respected
I was
people.
like, oh, and we called him AJ. And back in those days, back in the old days, we called it brother AJ, I am so sorry. And he just smiled. He goes, it's quite all right. And he rolled the window right back up. Well, I found the brother. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, I want to know how you can be married as long as you are,
Right.
and y'all still go parking. And I'll never forget his answer. He says, I've never let it get to a place where it ever got unhealthy. I've asked my wife for 60 years, how am I doing? How am I doing? And I don't think enough of us do this.
That's great.
How are we doing? Have we gotten so busy doing the next service that we forgot to stop and just kind of debrief what
Right.
we just did? Because we could be repeating something that's not working. So how do we do that? This will be in your show notes, and this is too much to write down too fast, but I give people 5 things in order to kind of know how you're doing. And that is, you have to collect data. So you have to have data. You have to know, if you're going to have a great children's ministry, you need to know how many kids came.
Right.
And how many at different ages. If you're going to park cars well, you need to know how many cars come and how many spots you have. Okay, so that's just collecting data. The second is, you have to give calendar time to evaluating results. We're good at this at Highlands. You know that.
We do it all the time.
Yeah, we have this, we call it the debrief. Sometimes we do it within hours of an event. How did we do? What would we change? Because if we wait till next year when we do the same event, we're going to forget what we would.
You only remember the positive.
Exactly. And we forget the tweaks that we wanted to make. So you have to give calendar time to evaluate results. Celebrate the wins. So in other words, don't be the person that's always dissatisfied. It's like, we could have done better. You know what? We did this part good. So let's have a party about that. Don't be that leader, by the way, that's never celebrating the few wins that you do have. Confront the facts. That's the hard one. Okay, there are some things that are not working. What are you willing to do? And the way I like to ask it, if somebody else had your job, what would they be willing to do to fix that? Because sometimes we're protecting some things. And then finally, get better. Just get better. And I always say, if you don't get better, you'll become a critic of those who are. So let's just get better. We can. That's the key to this third question.
We've had a whole lot of debriefs over pizza in the green room after services, after parties, after growth tracks, really asking, hey, how do we do? And there is the personality type that would say, it sounds like you're just being all about the numbers, like you're just counting things. And we have a phrase, you love to say this, we celebrate this.
Yeah, you count what matters, because if you passed out right now and we call paramedics in, they're going to put a blood pressure cuff on you.
Right.
They're going to check your heart rate. They're going to check your temperature. We don't celebrate the blood pressure cuff. The blood pressure cuff is going to give us 2 sets of numbers that are going to tell us how to take care of you. But we can't do it if we don't get those numbers. So we don't celebrate that. We want you alive. And the same is true with everything that matters. You count what matters to you, and obviously people matter. On the other side of this are people. So we're going to clarify the touchdown line. We call it the measurable win. The second thing that we're going to do is we're going to create something to accomplish that vision. That's the focus question. The third one is how are we doing? That's the reality question. And then this was the one that gets forgotten so much and is so critical. And I call this the culture question. And here's how it goes. What are the keys to success? Because here's what I know. So we've been helping churches now for more than 10 years with a lot of success. And then there are some that just say it just doesn't work for us. And when they give us the whole, it just doesn't work for us. We've done everything you've said to do, and it doesn't work for us. I think it's question number 4 that's the most important thing to ask in this, and that is, well, then tell me about your culture.
Culture's a big word.
Because here's what I know, Matt, and that is you would probably have better success doing the wrong thing in a great culture than doing the right thing in a bad culture.
That's strong.
Culture's everything. Culture can make things grow that wasn't even supposed to grow. Just the soil is that rich. And so I don't think you can talk enough about culture, and we're kind of running out of time on today's podcast, but probably the best culture lesson I ever learned, I want to pass on to our listeners today, actually came from Pastor Brian Houston at Hillsong, and I love this phrase. It's worth studying all by itself, and that is you can't build a culture, you can only be one.
That's great.
So anything you want, you have to become. So let me make that plain. In other words, you can't say, man, I wish our church prayed more. No. The best way to create a praying church is to be a prayer yourself. If you want a worshiping culture, well, then be a worshiper. If you want people to invite, Pastor, you would have a better success rather than telling your parishioners and your people at your church, you'd have better success than saying, hey, invite your friends. You'd have better success if you would tell the stories of the friends you've invited. And then it stirs up this excitement about it because being culture is the secret to it all.
So let's talk about our culture at Highlands. Some of the things that we celebrate as a staff, even in our staff culture, what are those things?
Yeah, and we may take a whole podcast just to teach these because I have a whole lesson around culture, but very quickly is that we love God, we value people, we pursue excellence, and we choose joy. That's honestly, I don't think you can find 4 better ones for a family, a business. It starts with a passion. Of course, our passion comes from our love, relationship with God. I don't care what you're doing, you can't be successful without valuing people. Excellence creates comfort and allows people to feel comfortable for things to happen. And then finally, I think attitude and joy. John Maxwell calls it the X factor. It's the most important factor for success. But perhaps we'll have an entire lesson just around these 4. So let me review with everybody one more time because we're going to bring this thing to a close. So you have to clarify a measurable win. We have to know what our touchdown line is and then create language to describe it. We're going to create a system that's going to deliver it. We're going to check ourselves to see how we're doing. That's the reality question. We're going to make sure we have the keys to success, which is culture. And then this is my favorite one.
It's a big action step.
Yeah, and it's particularly appropriate for the thousands of pastors and leaders who were just at the Grow conference, because I get asked this question all the time. Okay, you gave us a lot. They say this whole, I was drinking out of a fire hydrant kind of, they say, so they don't even like, where do I begin? Well, this is question number 5, and I call it the now question. And the now question goes like this. What one thing, if it got better, makes the biggest difference? So what one thing, if it got better, makes the biggest difference? And I always say, start with that one thing. And I use this illustration of a bucket that has wooden slats, and they're all tall except for one. There's one low slat of that wooden bucket. Well, it doesn't matter how tall the other slats are.
That's where you're leaking.
The water's running out at the level of the lowest slat, always. So the question is, do you know what that lowest slat is? And so many people just don't. I love this question. I think it's the best question you ask yourself. And that is, like, what one thing in my life, if it got better, would make a big difference, make the biggest difference in my life? By the way, the answer changes because if you'll fix it, then there's a different lowest slat. So it's a great question to ask for our church and staff. We ask it twice a year. Every 6 months, we do an all staff, and we answer that question. And it gives us a single top priority at any given time. It's a thematic goal that we can have in every conversation. And I'll tell one story, and then we'll bring this thing to a close. But I never forget one time we answered the question. It was a lot of people getting saved, very few people being water baptized. And it just didn't make sense. And honestly, it looked like a lot of people. But when we did the third question, actually checked ourselves, it was actually low.
Right.
It wasn't good. In fact, as salvations were going up, water baptism was actually going down. And so we made that, for that short season, our most important thing. And we put together 2 teams. One did an internal audit and one did an external audit. And basically what that means is we had one group on our team just study us. Did we change anything? Have we stopped announcing it? Let's just look at us and see if something changed. And then the external audit folks went out and looked at churches who do baptisms better than us. In fact, we told them, go find the top 5 churches who baptize more people and come back with ideas. Those 2 teams came back with 31 different ideas. We implemented 10. Baptisms went up 400%. And that's what I mean by when you have the power of, oh, wait a minute, this is where we're leaking water. I wonder who's listening today should ask that question about your marriage. Like, what one thing, where were we leaking water? What one thing, if it got better, would make the biggest difference? And I know this, if you answer these 5 questions, they are the keys to growth.
Thank you so much, PC. That's it for today, everybody. Cannot wait until next month for another episode of the GrowLeader podcast. Hey, be sure to subscribe wherever you're consuming this content, whether it's on the GrowLeader.com site or on social media or even watching us on YouTube. Go over to GrowLeader.com. We would love for you to be a part of the GrowLeader community. We want to get resources to you to help you. That's why we're here and why we exist. And if you know other leaders that could benefit from what you've seen today or heard today, get this out to them. Share it with them. Let's post about it and help as many leaders as we can reach their full potential. We'll see you next time.